John McMullen from 97.3 ESPN.com joins the conversation as we take a little deeper look at the meaning behind this game, John. You know, it's 5-6 versus 3-7-1, two kind of disappointing teams in terms of where they sit right now. But is there some importance in this game for Philadelphia?
Sure. I mean, they want to prove they can win on the road. They still think there's a chance because there's so many games in the division and home games in the division. So if you can kind of run the table here, I mean, 10-6, you probably don't have to look around for help because that's probably going to get you in. So I think as long as there's that hope, it's very, very important. It's probably unrealistic, but first steps first. You got to take them one at a time, and you got to prove you can win on the road against a team that's been very, very disappointing this season.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing. You know, let's if they win this game this week, it sets up a very intriguing matchup next week against Washington, right? I mean, they'll put them back to 6-6 with a team that's squarely a game and a half in front of them.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, every time you win, you sort of get an extra week to stay relevant the way the NFC is shaping up, and that would be no different for the Eagles because how the schedule is typically backloaded with those division games. And luckily for them, unluckily in the first half, when all of them were on the road and they couldn't manage to win one, now they're all at home. And, hey, if you hold serve, who knows what will happen. But, again, it doesn't mean much unless you can find a way to win in Cincinnati, which they've never done before, by the way.
Yes.
Not that they go there all that often, but still, that's some hurdle you have to overcome.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's a big thing is if they get this win, you're right. It almost is akin to last year where every week we'd be like, they're done. And then on Monday we'd come in and be like, they're done. But everybody that needed to lose around them just kind of keeping them hanging around for a long time. And it feels like if they win again this week, that would be kind of the environment is, well, you won. You made your game next week at least relevant. You might not believe, but your game mathematically remains relevant.
Exactly. And you know, on Thursday night, it was better for the Eagles that the Cowboys won. I know Eagles fans don't like that, but you want to get Minnesota out of the way. So the more of those sort of teams hanging around 500 keep losing, the better it is for the Eagles.
John, we know about A.J. Green on the other side, but how about Jordan Matthews for the Eagles? How's he doing, and does it look like he'll be a go?
Well, he's questionable, and I can tell you he did not look 100% when he was out there practicing in the limited time we get to see them in individual drills. He looked like a guy who's still struggling with the ankles, so if he does go, I would imagine he would have a lesser workload than he usually does, and he's certainly not going to be 100%.
How about at the tight end position? Because I know that's an interesting matchup to look at. Zach Eifert versus Ertz.
His name is Zach Ertz.
Yeah, Zach Ertz versus Tyler Eifert.
Sorry, I'm mixing the two tight ends together.
It's interesting because those two were the best two tight ends coming out of college. Eifert, a little more athletic, and he was the first-round pick. And they were kind of rivals in college as well. Zach played at Stanford, and Tyler played at Notre Dame. They play each other every season. So, hey, they're both really good. Eifert, as I said, a little more athletic, and he's a difficult matchup for any team. And I think he missed the first 6 games this year for Cincinnati with an injury. That was a big blow to their offense because he's a real difference maker in the red zone, especially because he can go up and catch some balls that other tight ends just can't do.
Getting back to the wide receiver position, do you think Doug would consider then activating 5 this week in case Matthews can't go? Or if he's
Doug
slow out there?
He was going back and forth because for whatever reason he doesn't want to admit he's going to dress Nelson Aguilar, which I think he will this week. And to me, then it depends on if Jordan goes. If Jordan goes, I don't think they're going to dress Paul Turner. If he's unable to go, obviously Paul dresses. So when it comes, and this is just a hunch, I think they're going to stay with the 4 receivers as they have for most of this year because they like the 3 tight ends they have, and they don't want to mess that up. But Ryan Matthews is not playing as well, so that enters into it. But either way, I wouldn't expect Paul Turner, if he is dressed, to get much playing time.
Yeah, I want to get into that a little deeper with Aguilar because I, too, wonder, well, I have 2 days. Why would I make any announcement? All you're doing, though, is playing with a guy's psyche who already is weak psychologically he's already somewhat weak. Why wouldn't you say, you know what, he had a good week of practice, we're going to go back with him? I mean, I get his premise to some extent. Look, Brandon Brooks got sick last week. We didn't know. Well, under those pretenses, fine. He was going to play, but he got sick. It seems like he doesn't even know the answer himself at this point.
I think he knows. Competitive advantage, Mike.
Is he Ron Hextall all of a sudden?
He doesn't want Cincinnati to know Nelson Aguilar is looming for them.
He talked a little bit about how the offense is different when Matthews is not out there, and it seemed like, they had their problems in the second half without Jordan, but he talked about going to the tight ends more, Burton and Ertz, and, he said, but this is where the Turner thing comes in, because he said there's a role that Paul Turner obviously could fill as well, and it seems like Turner had no targets at all in a game where he's kind of saying, well, when Jordan Matthews got out, we had an opportunity for a guy that we didn't put in our game plan at all.
No, they kind of limit, and they've labeled, and Doug's been honest about it. Paul Turner is kind of a slot guy. They don't think he can do anything else. And really, when Jordan went down, they went more 2 tight end looks and even 3 tight end looks at times. So it looks like that would be the way they would go. They would lean more on Selleck than another one of those, back-end receivers. And that's probably not a bad idea because he's a better football player.
Talking with John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. And, it's funny the back and forth you guys had with Doug today regarding Aguilar. Hey, keeping him in the mix, does that mean he's going to be active? Who's him? Nelson. Keeping him back? Like, what are you guys talking about here? Hello? I mean, I don't, like, how does he continue each day to make himself look worse?
Yeah, I mean, that's up for people to decide. Like I said, Chip Kelly never lost a press conference, and where did that get us? So I take that stuff with a grain of salt. But oftentimes Doug is too honest, and that hurts him. And he will sit and think about questions and try to answer them. My concern with Nelson Aguilar is a little different than everybody else's because I think he's going to play. And, for instance, if Jordan doesn't play, and all of a sudden Nelson Aguilar gets, 4 or 5 catches and starts to play a little bit better down the stretch, I think all of a sudden you have some fool's gold, and you could have an organization talking themselves into, well, maybe he's turning the corner, and we don't have as big as a need at that position as we think we do right now. And I think that would be the worst thing, because this is an organization that needs to completely revamp that position outside of obviously Jordan. And hey, right now it's just sort of piecemealing it together from week to week to get through the game. And that's what they're doing, not only with Nelson, but with the other guys, Bryce Treggs, DGB, and obviously Paul Turner. It's just, we've talked about it all season. It's just a really, really weak position for the Philadelphia Eagles.
John, don't most teams go 5 at that wide receiver position anyway, though? I mean, why don't the Eagles?
Yeah, most do, but a lot of it has to do with special teams. Because if you are dressing 5, I mean, that 5th guy typically isn't getting a lot of opportunities as a receiver, but he's one of your core special teams guys. And the Eagles just have those guys at other positions. So it has more to do with special teams and how they built their roster than anything else. And from a special team standpoint, that's about the only thing you can't criticize because that unit has been pretty solid all season.
Hey, let's take a look at the Bengals. 5 on the Bengals here from John over at 97.3 ESPN.com. How did Cincinnati get to 3-7-1 here with, I know injuries now, but Bernard, A.J. Green, they were healthy. This is a team that has been a 5 straight years in the playoffs. This is a division champion. Where did it all go wrong for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think mainly they've just been underachieving defensively, typically from where they usually are. And it really is strange because they have a lot of talent. And on paper, that talent has been producing. Geno Atkins is sort of their Fletcher Cox. He's one of the best defensive tackles in football. Carlos Dunlop, I wrote, is having a tremendous year. Leads the NFL in passes batted at the line of scrimmage with 10, and that's significant. He's got 6.5 sacks. They got a really talented secondary that's really deep. They got big names at linebacker who maybe underachieved a little bit. But they've been in the 20s for most of the year, and this is the defense you typically think of dating back to when Marvin took over and then Mike Zimmer came in. It's always been near a top 10 defense, and they've just kind of fallen off. And that part has been the most surprising part to me.
Yeah, and they're obviously disappointing, and they've had a long time. They have a very Andy Reid. They haven't been to the Super Bowl, but Marvin Lewis is like as close to Andy Reid situation in Cincinnati. I mean, that's kind of the parallel there. Like a team that has constantly won, came up short.
But he says we're not done. Oh, you might be Coach Lewis, but the team's not.
We're not done. No, but at least Andy won a playoff game. Nobody's coached more games with one organization and never won a playoff game than Marvin Lewis. So every time he takes the field, he sets a new record. It's 14 years. But so you can frame it that way, or you can frame it the other way and realize, hey, this team's been around since the late 60s. I think they had 7 playoff bursts before Marvin Lewis got there. They got 7 in the 14 years he's been there. So they're a heck of a lot better than they used to be. So it depends how you want to spin it. And then you look around the league, and you look at Jay Gruden, and you look at Zimmer, and you look at Hugh Jackson, who are all former coordinators, and it kind of tells you how much respect the rest of the league has for their program. So it's one of those things, and if you're in Cincinnati, I always tell the people, I'm on the radio there quite a bit, be careful what you wish for, because if you do want to move on from that continuity and go in a different direction, it could really, really hurt you. Now, that said, we all know, and from Andy being here, no matter how good a coach is, he's got a shelf life. And maybe Marvin's just reached a shelf life and people have stopped listening.
John McMullen with us as we talk about the Eagles and Bengals matchup. And, of course, before the game even begins, one of the things we'll look at is who wins the coin toss. Doug asked today about his decision or his penchant for when the Eagles win the coin toss to defer. What did he say about that, John?
Well, that's by and large. I mean, that's really been the Bill Belichick mode for years. And what you want to do is you want to hit them with the double punch. You want to score at the end of the first half, hopefully, and then get the football in the third quarter, score again, and that just demoralizes an opponent. That's the theory behind deferring. Every team that has a good defense, and certainly the strength of this team, despite the fact they haven't played well in the past couple of weeks, is certainly defensively. So if the Eagles win the toss, I mean, they're going to defer. That's just a prudent strategy, and I think if Doug went away from that, it would be a mistake.
Yeah, he kind of added math into it. He said there was a mathematical reason why he did it, which was head-scratching.
I'll tell you, the mathematical reason is Belichick does it.
John McMullen, 97.3.
It is a copycat league.
That's for sure. John, obviously, Philadelphia's got more life on their life support machine than the Bengals do in this season. Do they have enough to go on the road against a pretty bad team, 3-7-1? Do they rebound this week? They've lost won 2 out of the last 8 here. So you feeling a win in Cincinnati?
I'm not. It's tough to pick this team on the road. It's tough to imagine this team scoring a lot of points the way they're currently structured. And remember, that means Ryan Matthews is out. Jordan Matthews, if he plays, is not 100%. So where are the points going to come from this team is my concern. You're going to need maybe a special teams touchdown or a defensive touchdown to steal it. They've done that many times in the past, but that's difficult. You can't count on that from week to week. And for that reason, you almost have to take Cincinnati despite the struggles, and I got them winning the game 2016.
Hey, what'd you think of that 2-point conversion play last night?
Well, I'm writing about that today at FanRag NFL. Hey, I'm starting to agree with you, Mike. When you're talking about the official instead of the game.
Uh-oh.
But that said, there's no guarantee the Vikings in that awful offense, even if they make the right call, is going to convert. And
right. It's not. I always say it didn't.
Win in overtime.
I said the penalty doesn't cost you the game, but it impacts the outcome.
Sure, it definitely impacted the outcome, and to me, it goes far beyond that. It's an obvious call. Get it right. It's right in front of you. That's the simplify. It doesn't matter if it's 30-10.
Yeah.
And they're going for 2 just at the end of the game.
Right. To be clear, I'm not saying that Minnesota.
Right in front of you.
I'm not saying, to be clear, I'm not saying Minnesota lost because of that missed call last night. I'm saying it just impacted the future plays that could have occurred because they missed a call. They might have scored the 2-point conversion. They may have not. So I'm not saying they lost. I'm saying it impacted the outcome of that game. And it's, again, comes back to the fact that these guys are terrible. And, let's bring this into the equation. I'm glad that we brought up the officials. Troy Vincent last night, 17 full-time officials. What do you know about this?
Yeah, they're talking about hiring 17 full-time, which is long overdue. We've talked about it many times, and it's almost silly that in an industry that makes $13 billion, that's part-time guys being officials. And you kind of see it with Tony Corrente last night. It's like, I'm trying to explain how he could miss that call. And to me, to argue that repetition wouldn't increase his ability to get it right is ludicrous. And I think if you have all these guys, I've said it time and time again, at off-season work, there's plenty. That argument is specious. There is plenty of work for these guys to do. They could be all across the country at various OTAs, every team, mini camp, rookie camp. And I've always said that accomplishes 2 things. One, it helps the officials by getting them repetition, and it helps the players because they have actual officials that practice calling like they would call a game, and it gets the players more used to it. So the fact that the NFL, and to be fair, the NFL Referees Association has been fighting this for so many years, it hurts the product. And again, here we are on a Friday. We're not talking about the football game. We're talking about the officials.
John McMullen, 97.3, ESPN.com. FanRag NFL has more on that, and you'll be writing that about it, or about that very thing last night. You saw the end of that game, another missed call by the officials. Dean Blandino's crew having a rough year. John, enjoy the action this weekend. We'll catch up on Monday, pal.
Hey, thanks.
Oh, by the way, you picked Cincinnati, correct? What's the score? Give me your score.
2016.
2016 Cincinnati. All right, you're in.
All right, thanks, guys.